Let's take a look at some watercolour books. The first two books we're going to look through are good for beginners. Even if you've never put brush to paper, this is the best place to start in my opinion. The rest of the books are for beginners and beyond, but these books hold your hand through the whole process and explain some of the very basic starting principles. Now, there are a lot of books available out there in this sort of format with sort of walkthrough style tutorials, and they can be really helpful when you're first starting out. So these are just my personal favourites that have helped me in this style of book at getting my head around watercolour. Now, if you already have a basic understanding of watercolour, you can skip forward to the third book recommendation in this video. The first book that we are going to look at for complete beginners is Everyday Watercolour by Jenna Rainey, and it says learn to paint watercolour in 30 days. Now, this author is also a YouTuber and a skilled self-taught artist with just a fountain of knowledge on her YouTube channel, so definitely check her out if you haven't already. And the idea behind this book, like it says on the front, is to teach you how to paint watercolour in 30 days, and it has 30 exercises to follow in it. Now, she gives you a basic starting palette of colours, some paper recommendation, sort of brush sizes and types, your starting materials essentially, and then she goes into the basics of colour theory, value, harmonious colour choices, composition, and two different painting techniques, sort of the most basic ones, wet on wet and wet on dry. This information is really bite-sized just to get your wheels turning. You really need to supplement this book with other materials for a deeper understanding of these topics. So she starts simple and it's really approachable, just about getting your brush to paper. You're working on your brush strokes, see how water interacts with paint, and as she moves through the book, she gently guides you with line work and filling in shapes, exploring the medium in these sort of abstract shapes. Now, this is my first ever sketchbook, so don't judge, but this is an example of where I carried out this book, God, I don't know, 2017 now, so long time ago, but this is the kind of thing that you're working on. You can see here another example. That was really bad. Don't judge my good sketchbook. Anyway, by day 5 you are starting to paint simple leaves, then to trees. All the way through the book, the subjects basically become more complex, and she adds in sort of essential fundamental techniques to learn, such as painting light to dark, painting wet on wet, wet on dry, etc., layering, blending, shadows, all that good stuff. There's another example of sort of ones I've done from this book, specifically sort of leaves. I think this book is fabulous at introducing you to the basics of watercolour in a gentle, well-explained way that really holds your hand if you're not feeling confident, and actually gets you painting rather than just reading. It mainly focuses on painting nature, plants, there's some animals, some landscapes, but really it does lack painting people. But overall, this book is a really relaxing way to dip your toes into the world of watercolour. In this exercise here, you can see she's teaching you all the steps of drawing and painting out a papaya, and this is my 6-year-old attempt at painting a papaya. It's quite funny actually, because I've literally just recently done a new attempt at painting a papaya, so that's just like a sketchbooky one. Now, a few other good examples. She is teaching you how to paint a cactus. My attempt was there. In this chapter, she's introducing the idea of shapes and curves and more shadows with a, what are these called? Monstera leaves, the holy ones that everyone loves. And this is my beginner attempt back then. So you get the idea, different subjects as you go through, working on building a little set of skills for your very first sort of watercolour paintings. There we go. You can see, really easy to follow along. Oh, this one's actually quite lovely. This was a bird of paradise. I was pretty happy with that attempt back then. It's probably one of the nicest things I'd actually painted in the very early days of trying out watercolour. Cactus. I'll finish flicking through so you can get an idea of what is left in the rest of this book. The next book we're going to look at is Watercolour for the Absolute Beginner. Now, this book we will look at quite briefly, as again, it is brilliant for giving you exercises to follow in an easy to understand way, step by step. I've included this as it covers nature and plants and animals, a bit like the first book I showed you, but it also covers painting people. In the beginning, it is quite still life orientated with a few good old sort of fruit studies that you can't really get mad at fruit studies, can you? That I feel like everyone sort of starts there. And this book actually gives you really simple palettes to use, often just 3 colours. Again, I can show you some examples of ones that I've carried out. All of these, that is from this book. Somewhere you've got a nana, there you go, cherries and the banana. And there's grapes somewhere in here. There go grapes. This is the full set of fruit somewhere. There you go. As I was saying, this book gives you really simple palettes and it shows you how to use them. And as you move on to landscapes and trees and flowers, she starts to slowly add more colours into the mix, sort of slowly introducing you to the idea of colour mixing and increasing your confidence in it. Now, I will say the drawback of this book is it is not quite as sort of step by step as the previous book. It's not as obvious. You really do have to study the examples a bit more to work out where to put the paint. But by no means is it a sort of here's the final product book where you can't fathom out how they got there. It is still easy to follow. So if we skip onto the people section, it talks about a few techniques for painting people and gives some really good simple exercises to do to sort of replicate what you see in the book. It also has a nice section on skin colour, with colour choice recommendations for different skin tones. There's also a section on proportions of the body and of the face, sort of side profile painting as well, and through different ages. You've got older faces and younger faces, talks you through different hairstyles. But really, I would say this is a good start, but more in-depth books would be beneficial, but this will get you going. And the final section of the book, after people, it turns to animals, where it introduces basic drawing techniques such as using shapes. Here it is somewhere. Here you go. So you use basic shapes to map out the animals before redefining those shapes and making them look more animal-like. It also introduces painting with tone, so just one colour. Overall, it just introduces some really nice techniques to create texture, interest, and sort of different effects throughout the book. So I think this is a really good little complementary book for complete beginners, along with the first book by Jenna Rainey, The Beginner and Beyond books. Now, these books are better suited for when you already know a little bit about watercolour and want to up your skills, increase your confidence and just gain a deeper understanding of the medium. Watercolour techniques for artists and illustrators. This book is more one that you dip in and out of. It covers a vast range of techniques for you to play around with, and it's broken up into the basics, different techniques and subjects. Now, the first section covers the basics, covers topics like drawing, observation, materials, colour theory, perspective, planning, brushes, and then the next sections move on to more specific techniques that are, like I said, divided into beginner, intermediate and advanced techniques. Although honestly, I think some of the more advanced techniques can actually be beneficial to learn early on. So really dip in and out of this book whenever you fancy, really. Now, there is so much in this to really get your creative juices flowing and get you thinking about different ways of applying paint to paper beyond the basics of wet and wet, wet and dry, dry brushing, tone, washes and lifting out. You can really deepen your skill set with tools and skills with different techniques like using wax resist or masking fluid, learning about incorporating negative space, understanding shadows, different types of washes, adding pen in with line and wash. It really does focus on sort of shadow and light in different areas of the book, as well as sort of getting different effects, such as using a sponge, using salt, cling film, adding charcoal, incorporating gouache, and things like that. And the final section of the book actually focuses on painting different subjects. So we'll skip through to that. Now, the subject section of this book is really nice because it recommends different techniques from the book that are useful when painting those specific subjects. It covers landscapes, townscapes, trees, water, it covers snow, urban scenes, creating abstract landscapes. There's a real mix in this book. It also covers flowers more briefly, and then it has a section on portrait figures and animals. So really overall, this is just a really nice book to refer back to when you're painting a new subject, or you're wanting to add a bit of spice to your painting techniques and try something new. I mean, not actual spices. I mean, would that work? No, just stick with salt. Now, the next book might be one of my favourite books. This is Hazel Sloane's The Art of the Limited Palette. Now, this book is filled with beautiful paintings and it's in a hardback format, but the wealth of information in here it's just fabulous. It has really helped change my understanding of colour. This author has loads of wonderful watercolour books and a lovely way of explaining things, so if you like this, you'll probably like her other books. So why this book when she's got so many? This book focuses on a limited colour palette and its benefits. This essentially means using the least number of tubes of colour while still achieving a wide range of colours in the painting. It teaches you to focus on finding a small number of colours that mix together well to create beautiful, harmonious watercolour paintings, no matter how large or small. I find this can take a lot of frustration out of colour mixing, especially if you're a beginner and wanting to learn more about how the individual colours interact with each other. Painting this way can help you learn how to use all of the colours in your palette. This book mainly focuses on using 2, 3 or 4 colour palettes. What she's trying to do here is to get you to focus on understanding each tube of paint is a different pigment and understand how those different pigments interact and behave with each other and alone to make the painting process smoother and less frustrating. She talks you through hue and tone, transparency versus opaque colours, staining colours and temperature bias, sort of cool versus red, and just lots of examples of different colours, ultimately helping you to understand how to mix colours a little easier. This book is packed full of detailed walkthroughs and example paintings where she points out which colours, how and why they were used to make each painting. There is just so much information in this book. She talks about mixing blacks, using earth colours, colour interactions, the issues that can arise from mixing too many pigments. She talks through granulation. There is so much to list here, and this is only the first section of the book. Let's move on to the second section. The second section is the limited palette. Now, this is really where you see the limited palette put to use. She gives examples of how to choose colour combinations with a lot of different subjects as demonstrations like trees, landscapes, sunsets, cities, people, wildlife. I mean, this book really is a joy to read and will deepen your understanding of your own palette immensely if you put this into practice yourself. This next book is called Mastering Atmosphere and Mood in Watercolour. Now, this book is near on impossible to get a hard copy of unless you are willing to dish out close to 250 quid, as it is out of print, unfortunately. However, if you have access to an online library website called the Internet Archive, you can access a copy for free. If you're in the UK, you'll need to use a VPN, as currently it's not always accessible depending on your internet provider. Now, this is a chunk of a book. The most valuable part, however, I think, is his unique description of how to control the wetness of your paper and the amount of pigment and water used when painting. Now, I haven't come across another book that describes it this well. Most just leave it up to your own trial and error. He uses something called the watercolour clock to explain how to get water and pigment to do what you want them to do on the paper. He uses this to show how he creates his paintings throughout the entire book. The clock is broken up into two sides, one being the pigment, one being the paper wetness. With the pigment, he describes the consistency ranging from tea, thin and watery, to coffee, a stronger mix, to milk, thicker and closer to the colour in the palette, then to cream, more like gouache for dark areas, and then finally butter, pretty much straight from the tube. On the wetness side, it goes from dry to damp to moist to wet, and here he explains how the different consistencies of pigment behave on different paper wetnesses, resulting in different techniques of painting. Now, this book will really encourage you to experiment with how you are laying down your paint on the page and how much water you are mixing in, as well as how wet your page is, all leading to a deeper understanding of the basic mechanisms of watercolour. Now, the rest of the book is still packed full. It covers in-depth ideas around composition, colour, soft and hard edges with watercolour, simplifying your work, identifying shapes, adding depth to your painting, how to add detail without overworking areas, how and when to use different size brushes, how to create mood and atmosphere in your painting, and a good section on tone and how values can make or break your painting. This is a big book, and the paintings it holds are just so beautiful and inspiring. If you can find a copy, it is well worth investing some time into this book. Now, the final book on my list is the Landscape Painter's Workbook by Mitchell Albala. Now, this is my little wild card in the list. It's not specifically aimed at watercolour, but the principles can be applied to watercolour. Now, it's landscapes, it says, but I think the advice here applies to all subjects, not just landscapes, which is why it made my list. This book is another gem that contains exercises at the end of each chapter to get you practicing and using the concepts he talks about. And this, I just think this is essential and a really good aspect of any art-related learning books. Again, it gets you putting brush to paper, which is really effective. So, the first section is on shape interpretations. And again, you can use this for any subject, not just landscapes. It is focusing on reducing your subject into larger, simplified shapes, either as a starting point or for an abstract look to a piece. It breaks it up into large shapes, helping you lay out the scene easily and better identify the areas of shadow and light, and overall how you can judge and tweak the composition of your piece. He also jumps into value early on. One part of the book which I found really interesting is he explains that paintings are more visually appealing when we use an 80-20% rule, where 80% is larger, less detailed shapes, and 20% is your more detailed areas where you're trying to guide the viewer's eyes. And he gives really nice examples of this throughout the book, followed by the exercises that you can do to try and improve your skills in these concepts. The next chapter, he focuses on composition using a little rectangular window, discussing when and which format, vertical or horizontal, is best suited depending on your subject. Now, I will say this is probably more suited for landscapes or cityscapes, but it can be applied to other subjects. He also talks about the square format, which is more popular recently, let's hope not just because of Instagram. This chapter follows on with exercises where you can put this into practice. The next chapter follows on, still focusing on composition, and deep dives into different aspects such as variations, which helps a composition look more interesting to the eye, angles of large shapes in your painting, and also adding movement to your painting to help guide the eyes of the viewer. This chapter is very helpful for anyone struggling with composition and particularly with composing landscapes. So after the exercise section, you move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 4, and this chapter focuses on notands or value studies, which is actually something I've been doing for a while now, and it's a really good way of either planning out your original painting using the values, or for better understanding the light and shadow and shapes in a reference images that you are using. So if you're new to Notan, this is a really nice introduction to using it as a tool to plan and improve your paintings moving forward. The next few chapters focus on colour theory, but he covers a lot of topics that aren't usually talked about, such as modifying the colours you paint with rather than simply painting what you see, to emphasise different areas or create different atmospheres. He does, however, cover different ways of achieving colour harmony, and again dive into value and colour before going into other aspects of colour like saturation, and finally a brief chapter on picking a colour palette for your artworks. However, this sadly hasn't got watercolour in it. I think it has pastels and oil in it, but you can still apply the concepts to watercolour. So there we have it really. These are my top recommendations for books for learning watercolour and why. Do you have any alternative recommendations? If you do, write them in the comment section below and please do let me know. Thank you so much for watching and you will see me in the next one. Bye.